Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another interview with BookTrib. BookTrib, the leading source of news and reviews. I'm Casey Barrett and thrilled to be here this afternoon with Hank Phillippi Ryan. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm coming to you from sweltering Boston, where it is about to absolutely pour. So I hear you are someplace beautiful and foggy and lovely.
I'm up here in the Catskill Mountains, about 100 miles north of New York. It's pouring. We're getting the remnants of the hurricane, but it's beautiful. Waterfalls are flowing out the window.
Oh, lovely. Sounds great. Well, you look so cozy. It's so very nice.
It feels good to be up here, that's for sure. So congratulations. Today is the release day of your 12th book, The First to Lie. It's fantastic. I finished it yesterday.
Thank you.
And we were talking right before we went live about releasing books during a pandemic and how your normal routine would be packing your bags and getting ready to go on a book tour, and not so much this time.
Well, it's, I count my blessings about what we have. I mean, we're able to talk like this, and that's wonderful. This morning on Pub Day, usually for the past, 12 years, 11 years before, on Pub Day, I'm packing and getting my boarding passes and making sure the publisher has the hotels. And then tonight is my launch party, and I'm worried about having champagne and whether anybody will come. There's always, my mom used to call them party fits. No matter how wonderful a party was about to be, you always worried, would nobody come and would it be okay? And, and so now it's just, there's still what hasn't really changed, Casey, is very interesting, I worked on this book, I worked on The First to Lie for a year. Through thick and thin and frustration and worry and love and hope and reliance on the process and fear of the deadline and all those kinds of things. And that process is the same. And that moment, that day when the book goes out to real people and real people are reading it, there is nothing on the planet, and my experience is wide now, there's nothing on the planet that stops that moment of absolute sheer joy and terror when your new book goes out into the world, no matter what kind of a world it goes out into. It's always safe inside a book. And that's why I love the idea of offering what I hope is a page-turning, thrilling story to all of us who are, we need something to read. We need to be, a new book lets you be someone else for a while, solve someone else's problems for a while, have someone else's life for a while. And when the walls fall away and you're in the midst of a page-turning book, I mean, in another universe, I would have said, I want you to miss your stop on the T. I want you to miss your stop on the subway because you're so engrossed in The First to Lie. Now I just say, maybe I'll give you some entertainment. Maybe it will give you some diversion. Maybe it will, maybe it'll keep you up at night a little bit reading just one more chapter. So that's what I hope for. That's all I can hope for.
I call it my my escape hatch, where I'm almost notoriously always carrying around a thriller wherever I go, grocery store, whatever, even to a social situation where maybe people raise an eyebrow, why you bring a book to a dinner party? But it's like this comforting escape hatch, especially nowadays where reality is almost too grim to contemplate, but it's nice to be able to get, especially with thrillers, and something that will just take you, like you said, where the walls fall away. It's a wonderful thing.
I do think that some of us, and I'm talking about me when I say some of us, initially when this all started, it was very difficult for me to focus on a book. There was like this sort of veneer of terror over everything. And so my usual reading focus was sort of harder to corral. And I don't know whether it's good or bad, but now I can read again, and now I can write again. And that was difficult during the first weeks or so.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks of March, I feel like it was like this paralysis set in. Mm-hmm. It was very, very odd. I think that's why Tiger King became such a phenomenon, because it was the only thing people could kind of get their consciousness around, was something so ridiculous.
It was weirder than this.
Yeah.
And you would read books and people would be in crowds, or you see people on TV and movies and they're hugging, and be like, no, don't hug that person. And why are there so many people on the street? And so the template of the pandemic just was sort of set over everything. And I now think, I hope, that we're trying to remember that life will come back in some semblance of some kind of normal. You were talking as we were starting about book tour, and I look at my suitcase now, which, would be any other day would be sitting by the front door waiting to go at the crack of dawn tomorrow morning to Scottsdale, to Poison Pen. I mean, that's just what you do. And now, the suitcase is sort of this poignant memory of another way of life. And now we persevere. Now we do something else.
So it's hard to contemplate getting on planes and going to airports, or even, school is, we were mentioning before, I have a 9-year-old, and the whole notion of going back to school is fraught. But yeah, I think we're finally starting, rather than hunkering down, trying to envision a return to some kind of society again. We'll see.
But you always need a book, right? No matter where you are, you
permanently have to have a book. My book ordering has, even though I haven't spent time in bookstores, has gone through the roof. It's always really over the top. But my orders on Bookshop, and I try to do Bookshop first to support independent ones. If I can't find it there, I will do Amazon reluctantly. But I feel like there's always either or I'm asking BookTrib for one of your new book, or yet to be released.
Yeah, and you got to have the first to lie.
Yes.
And that's why BookTrib is so great, because a lot of we spent a lot of time. We all spent a lot of time going to bookstores and just sort of browsing. And now the idea that there's a curated selection and knowledgeable people who are saying, read this, or you might love this. It's really fun to be reading BookTrib and listening to these interviews, because it's people who are sharing the same joys and concerns and delights and interests that all of us have. So it's a wonderful community. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, it's raised a sense of community. It's just shifted the geographical meeting point is very different, but that sense of community is just as strong.
Yes.
Speaking of sites where we find new recommendations and everything, I read you posted an essay or published an essay today on Crime Reads, another one of my favorite sites. Terrific essay about going undercover, which is a big theme in your book. I wonder if you could just tell me a little bit more about what brought you to write that. I love the story of the deliverance man raising puppies in an awful puppy mill. Tell me a little bit more. Tell our listeners a little bit more about the essay and where they can find that.
Well, the essay is on Crime Reads, and it does, which I love as well, and it does have a little bit of an insight into some of my undercover adventures. I've been a television reporter for 43 years, which is crazy. I'm still on the air here in Boston, and I've wired myself with hidden cameras and confronted corrupt politicians and chased down criminals and got undercover and in disguise. And one of the undercover adventures that I talk a little bit about, I think, in the Crime Reads, but I'll tell you more about it. And one of the things that was really the impetus for The First to Lie took place, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, maybe before that. We were doing an investigative story about, well, in Massachusetts at the time, there was no way for potential patients to find out the records, the histories, the legal histories of doctors that they wanted to see as patients. There was no way to find out except to go to court whether a doctor had a malpractice record or even a record of cases or a record of malpractice losses. So I went to the Board of Registration in Medicine and said, it's not on the doctor's permanent record here that a potential patient could look up. How is a patient supposed to know whether a doctor has a malpractice record and how many cases they've won or lost? And I knew, and as a reporter, I know, as a person, I know that doctors will have malpractice cases, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's cost of doing business from time to time. But if you have a serious record of malpractice losses, when it comes to patient knowledge and patient decision-making, it's something that the patient should at least be able to make their own decision based on full disclosure. So the director of the Board of Registration in Medicine back then told me that if you ask a doctor whether they have a malpractice history, they should tell you. And I remember bursting out laughing, and I said, No, they're not going to do that. If I ask a doctor if they have a bad malpractice history, they're not going to say, "Oh, sure, ma'am. You know, I've lost millions and millions of dollars."
Right.
They're not going to say that.
Right.
So, in order to find out whether that was true, I posed as a woman who was hoping to get pregnant. And I had my hair pulled back and no makeup and big glasses. And I went to a doctor's office with my producer, a man who was portraying my husband. And I was wearing like 3 sweatshirts. And in one of the sweatshirts had a little hole, a button, where it was placed a little camera lens. We called them button cam, which was the lens of the camera that a wire snaked down under my sweatshirt, and the guts of the camera were in this geeky looking fanny pack that I was wearing. And we went into the doctor's office pretending to be patients to see whether the doctor would tell us about his malpractice history. And so, you know, you can't, in Massachusetts, you can't record audio without someone telling you, without disclosing it, but you can
Only
record
silent video. Yeah.
only silent video, exactly. So I wasn't doing anything illegal, but it was something that I'm sure the doctor would have preferred me not to be doing. So we go through this whole consultation, and near the end of the consultation, I said, you know, I'm just interested in your malpractice history. Could you tell me, do you have a history of malpractice lawsuits brought against you, and what were the results of those? Do you have a lot of malpractice losses? And I knew, because there was no sound, that I had to make it very clear on silent video what his answer was.
Shaking his head.
So I go, do you have a lot of malpractice cases? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And he says, no. And I say, oh, no? And he says, no. And so there it was, you know, completely no.
Right.
And that was just a lie. You know, we knew we had looked him up, of course, and we knew that he had a serious history of really scary malpractice losses. And we did that in several doctors' offices. And as a result of the story that we later did, now in Massachusetts, in a doctor's permanent record, the regulation was changed to require them to disclose that history in their permanent records. So, you know, but when I thought about that, about going undercover, how that doctor behaved differently to me as a patient than he would have if I had been a reporter. He probably wouldn't have talked to me if I had been a reporter. So sometimes going undercover is the only way to find out something. And then I thought, and I'll talk really, really fast about this. Then I thought about how we're all undercover all the time. We're all, you know, we behave differently to our mom than we do to our girlfriend or boyfriend or to our boss, or when we meet someone new. We put on this persona of the person that we hope to portray. And we be that person through and through. And then I thought, what if someone decided, especially a reporter, what if a reporter decided that it would be more desirable to be the person they were pretending to be instead of the person who they were? What if being someone else could get you what you want? And I thought, oh, that would be a good book. And then I thought, one more thing about Undercover. As a reporter, when you see my stories on television, you don't know how I feel about it. You don't know if I was terrified talking to the person, you know, whether I really wanted to do the story. You don't know what I've left out. If I do 15 hours of video and my story is 2.5 minutes long, what did I leave out? What did I forget to ask? What did I ask? You know, how did I make that decision? What pressures, external pressures, were on me to make the story be the way it is? How did I decide what puzzle pieces to choose? You will never know that when you watch TV, because the reporter is undercover in the story. And so in The First to Lie, I wanted to show what it was really like. Part of the story is what it was really like to be undercover as a reporter, and how you have to truly, I mean, the key of undercover reporting, the secret of it, is to truly believe that you are who you say you are. It's really method acting, and it's absolutely terrifying, but it can be really beneficial. But in The First to Lie, what if someone has sort of sinister motives for that? And what if more people are pretending to be someone else than we initially know? So all that, I know, longest possible answer to your perfectly wonderful question.
Excellent.
That's what all that went into The First to Lie. And I think one of the things about it is you will get that authentic, genuine understanding of what that experience is. And not only the benefits, but the serious dangers and the super pitfalls that can happen as a result of that.
Well, in The First to Lie, there's not just one character who's undercover. There's all sorts of shifting identities. The biggest note I made when I was reading it was that it felt to me a book about identity itself. And I marked it. There's just one passage, and I won't take it out of context or blow any part of the plot, but a character asked, "What is identity? We're all only who we say we are. Everyone's hiding something. Everyone's undercover, struggling to be who they want to be in public, and only being themselves when alone." And that struck me as like almost the thesis of so much of the book. But also, you could feel a little bit dark and cynical when you unpack that quote, where is reality, does it only exist in a vacuum? Are we only our authentic selves when we're only alone, and then we're only playing a role at all other times? Perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps, because we gauge, it's all about goals and motivation and how far someone would go to get what they want. Mm-hmm. And in The First to Lie, and I love that you picked that passage, and I actually forgot that I wrote it, and I thought, you know what, that's perfect. That's exactly what the book is about. So, but in The First to Lie, everybody wants something. And, I don't really like graphic violence in books, and I don't like graphic sex in books, and I don't really use a lot of inappropriate language, but what I am fascinated by is gaslighting and mind games and manipulation, and how psychological, the use of psychology on someone else can be just as devastating a weapon as a gun or a knife. It is dangerous, it is lethal. You can lead someone on the path to believing something that's not true, to their absolute devastation. And I think that we as human beings have this power, this mental, manipulative, deceptive power. And when that is unleashed, that can be really terrifying. We all know people who are like that, who can really manipulate and really gaslight. And I tried to mine that in The First to Lie. And you would never know, right? You never know until you know. Until
right.
The moment when you say, wait a minute, yeah. That's just not true.
And it's particularly dangerous when someone can convince themselves that they're being righteous in it. And that's a lot of the characters in the book. There's most of the time, whatever awful things humans do, you'll first have to convince yourself that it's okay. You forgive yourself and convince yourself of your righteousness before you go and do something awful.
Exactly. How many times have people said, I'm only trying to help, I'm only trying to do the right thing, I'm only trying to make things better. I did this for you. I did this for you. I made this decision for you. And you say, I would rather have made that decision myself. Right. And that's one of the things that the book is really about as well, is empowering people to, especially in doctors' offices. I mean, the sort of underlying milieu of the book is a big pharmaceutical company that has a drug that it tells women and doctors will help them get pregnant. And the search for, I say about the book, it's about betrayal, motherhood, obsession, and revenge. And all of that goes into the book. So if a family member betrays you, if a member of the medical profession betrays you, if a big company betrays you, if your boss betrays you, if a friend or colleague betrays you, how deeply might that get to your soul? And how deeply might you want to get revenge for that? I mean, and when does humiliation and disappointment and sorrow turn to obsession? Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the mind games of The First to Lie.
Yeah.
The title, ask me about the title.
Okay. Well, before I ask you about the title, I do want to, you touched on the different themes, obsession and identity and everything, but I feel like the core of it also is about motherhood or parenthood, where nothing quite changes an identity like becoming a parent. And a lot of the longing and the justification for a lot of the sinister behavior in the book is rooted in that longing to become a mother or just have the chance to be a parent. And I don't know, I think that is something that will resonate hugely for an awful lot of readers, because it's something that it's intangible of how strongly that can lead people to do just about anything.
The women who want more than anything to have a family, to have a biological child, the extent to which their lives are consumed by that, not only their lives, but their husbands' lives and their families' lives are consumed by that. And that, those women are so particularly vulnerable in so many ways. Some women feel that they're not fully fulfilled as women, that people will consider that they failed. Some people's husbands, some women's husbands are critical. I have a woman in the book who says, her husband thinks my husband thinks I'm a failure because it's difficult for me to have a child. And the way that women can assess their own value by whether they have a child or not is really this heartbreaking, vulnerable, devastating, touching, emotional journey. And that's what, when you talk about big pharma or big medicine or big anything, this book is about individuals. This book is about individual people who are longing for a family, and sometimes who have that choice taken away from them without their consent, without their knowledge, when it could have been prevented, but someone else's desires for power or money or control stomped on it. And when they find out what really happened, how angry would you be?
Mm-hmm.
You were doing what you thought was right, and someone else said no for their own reasons. I mean, it's sinister, and there are sad moments in the book, touching, I think, poignant, I hope, moments where we hear from women who are searching for a family, and how they feel when that is taken away, and how some people get sad and some people are enraged.
Mm-hmm. And there's a human calculus that goes to big pharma, and you can even point out it's a big element of the pandemic response, where you can rationalize that, okay, maybe it's 1 of 100, and you touch on this, is it 1 in 1,000? If you make that calculus, you're basically removing the individual from being seen. You're.
I mean, it's interesting because when you, exactly as you say, Casey, when you talk about the big picture, it helps so many people. It helps so many people. And then if you say, well, a couple of people are going to be really devastated by this. A couple of people, some people are going to have their lives harmed forever, irrevocably, as a result of this. And then the person will say, yes, but it helps so many people. And doesn't it depend on whether you're one of the many or one of the few? And that's one of the things I think that we don't talk about a lot. And I don't make any decisions about it. I mean, I really want the reader to one of the things that my goal in this book is to have people readers just think about the world maybe in another way, that there is justice, and there is truth, and there is fairness, and there is the greater good, and there's the personal good. And I have no answers for that. It's just something that we need to talk about and have in our consciousness. So if a person in authority says you need to do this, we need to be empowered to say, tell me why, tell me all the facts, tell me what could happen, and then let me make the decision.
And that really goes to the core of journalism. And I mean, I suspect you would call yourself a journalist first and a author of fiction second, or maybe they're now equal. But the way you describe that to me describes what good journalism should be, is putting the answers out there.
Yes, it's all about knowing the answers, and then letting people make their own decisions based on their own values and their own judgments and their own needs and their own desires. That's exactly what The First to Lie is about, because the first person to lie to you means that's the person that you're basing your judgment on. And if they're telling you something that's not true, then you're on the path to disaster. But if you know and say, I have agency, I am doing this because I understand the facts, and this is my decision, then fine, we all can make our own decisions. But to make a decision based on manipulation and mind games and deception and gaslighting. That's what's scary, and that's what makes a page-turning thriller, because the readers will know things that the characters don't know, and that is sort of the dramatic irony of writing multiple points of view, isn't it? That we, the reader, can say, "Oh no, don't go in there," or or "No, that's not true," or "That's not what really happened," or "That person is shading the truth. That's not the whole story." But the characters don't know that. So it's really fun to write these books. It's really fun to become these other people and understand their motivations and their desires and their personal surprises. I don't know what's going to happen next until I sit at the computer and write it. I don't know, until I write the next sentence or the next paragraph or the next scene. So that's what gets me to the computer every day. I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen. I wonder what's going to happen. And the only way for me to know that is to write that. So when people say, wow, the end of the first to lie, the middle of the first to lie, the twist in the first to lie, they say, wow, you really surprised me. I'm like, yeah, wasn't that a surprise? Because I didn't know.
Well, I think that's among the mystery writing community, is something that we always talk about, where are you an outliner or a pantser, and call it, I guess, writing from the seat of your pants. And I have similar take as you, that if I'm not surprised, then how can you expect the reader to be surprised? Like, the writer's the first reader. So I have a hard time understanding how someone can outline a mystery and then expect someone to be surprised in the end.
I've said to my editor, and thank you, and maybe I'll just have you come talk to her. I've said, sometimes people ask me for a synopsis, and I say, I cannot write a synopsis. I cannot. Please don't make me do that. Because how do I know what happened until it happens? And it doesn't happen until it happens in the book. Because everything you write, everything that happens in a book happens because of what happened before. So there's an occurrence, and then there's a reaction, and then there's a decision, and then there's forward motion, and then an obstacle, and then another decision, and then another action, and then another result, and then more forward motion. And those decisions that the characters make, that's what creates a personality. And so every time they have to face an obstacle and get around it to get to what they want, that's the story, and that's revealing, and that tells us, that gives us plot and character, and that gives us motivation, and that gives us forward motion, as I keep saying. So if I try to do that real fast, I'm going to be wrong. It's going to be wrong. And I've said to my editor, and we can have this editor talk, I've said to my editor, I will write this synopsis and I will happily send it in, but the book you'll get is not going to be anything like this. And so I'm happy to make stuff up and just send it in. But good luck with having the story be that, because on page 1, it will start going somewhere else. Yeah. And that's why I write, to see what surprises I have.
And I don't know about you, but that's also why first drafts should never be seen by any other eyes.
Oh my golly, I know. I'm in the midst of writing my 13th book right now. And I should be farther along. But so I'm sitting here at the computer. I mean, right here is where I write. I'm sitting here at the computer saying, this is the worst thing, typing. This is the worst thing that anybody has ever written in the entire history of the planet. I mean, I have awards for writing. I clearly have books. It's kind of worked. And I think, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to write a book. I don't know how I wrote that one. I don't know how I wrote the ones before that. But however I did it, I can't do it again. And there's no way, and forget about it. So then I say, okay, but you have to do this. So just write one more sentence. And then I say, it's going to be a terrible sentence. And then I say, sure, write a sentence, write a terrible sentence, and then write another terrible sentence. And then eventually eventually an idea comes, and you think, oh, that's what this is about. That's what I meant to write. Okay, I see that. And then you're on your way. It's just this clawing your way through terribleness. And then when you have this first draft, and I send it to my editor and I think, help, this is, I say, somewhere in this, great story, somewhere in this. And it helps me, there are 5 things about the first to lie, that when you talk about what's the book about. And this is sort of what helped me in writing the first to lies. I figured out the 5 things, which is, a devastating childhood betrayal, an undercover reporter who's in too deep, a beautiful sailboat on the Chesapeake Bay, a rich and powerful family, and an ice pick that is not used for ice. And I thought, okay,
There you go.
that's what it is, and that's what the First to Lie is.
And I mean, those were actually, you mentioned that boat on the Chesapeake Bay. Those were my favorite scenes. I spent some time there growing up myself. I wondered, do you have experience on the bay down there? Is that an area you know well? Because I really enjoyed those scenes, particularly on the boat, are just fantastic.
Oh my goodness, thank you. That's lovely. No, I've been sailing a million times, and I know about sailing somewhat. I'm not an experienced sailor, but I do love it. Not on Chesapeake Bay, so I did a lot of research about that and talked to a lot of people who do sail on Chesapeake Bay, or in the coves of Chesapeake Bay. I mean, going way out would be dangerous, but I know about sailing, and I know how it feels to be on a sailboat. You know, the sun and the wind and the rush and all that. I love that, and I thought it was a very, it's a beautiful and sinister. Those are beautiful and sinister scenes, and I love that juxtaposition and the conflict and that things are going on. You're sailing on this beautiful water, and things are going on that you have no idea what are. So thank you. I loved it. One of my favorite parts of that research was researching the beer. What kind of beer would it?
Bohemian. That's what they drink down there.
Yes, exactly.
Yep. So you said you're working on your 13th. Is it another standalone? Because you had 2 series, and now this is the 3rd standalone. First to Lie is right. Your 3rd standalone.
The First to Lie is my 3rd standalone. This is Reporters Doing Math. But it's interesting writing a standalone after writing 9 series books. The difference between writing a series and a standalone is so profound and really pretty fascinating, because in a series, yes, you have the joy of who your main characters are and where they live and what they do, and it'll be another adventure with the characters who you love. But the thing is about a series, that even though you have these underpinnings all set for you, the suspense in a series can't come from the mortality of the main character, because Jane Ryland in Say No More is not going to die, because she's going to come back in book 6. So the reader is smart, and the reader knows no matter what peril Jane and Jake are in, the cop and the reporter, no matter what peril they're in, they're going to be fine. Jake and Jane are not going to die. So the writer has to come up with some reasonable, logical, realistic situation that they can be in that's suspenseful enough, and you bring in other characters who you do care about, who can be in peril, and that's the conundrum for a series writer. How to keep the reader reading and make it suspenseful when the main characters are not going to die. But in a standalone, like Trust Me, like The Murder List, like The First to Lie, everything is on the table. Everything is up for grabs. Anybody can be good. Anybody can be bad. The readers, the readers going into a standalone have no expectations, because anything can happen. Anybody can be guilty. Anybody can be lying, and anybody can die. Any character can die. And so that's the wonderful tightrope, which I love about writing standalones, is that on every page, you have no idea what's going to happen. And as we've talked about, I have no idea what's going to happen. And sometimes in these books, I think, that person's bad? Oh, I wonder why they were behaving like that. Or sometimes I think, I'm so sorry, but you're going to have to go. You're just going to have to go. And I think the readers are never going to see this coming, because I didn't either. So the power of the standalone is what really draws it to me. It's the most important thing that ever happened in these people's lives. This is the thing you need to know. That their lives go on, has happened before the book. Be defining right? Yeah, you're getting this moment, and the lives of there's a before and after of the book. But we, the reader, we just don't need to know that. We just need to know what happens in The First to Lie.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I hope everyone has enjoyed.
Oh gosh, the time went by so fast. I'm sorry. I'm yammering.
No, it's fantastic talking to you. And good luck writing the number 13. keep cranking them out. I'm sure more awards are coming.
Cranking them out. You know what like there is no cranking involved. There's just clawing up the slate side of the mountain. Right?
Well, thank you again so much. Hope everybody has a great afternoon, and congratulations on 1st July.
Thank you. Find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook, find me on Twitter. Thank you all. Thank you, BookTrib. I rely on you. So I'm so honored to be here today. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.